Ready? Everybody ready? Good. Let's call this a work session to order, please. This is a work session for the regular meeting of the Common Council, the City of Plattsburgh, July 13th, 2017. This is an opportunity for us to have any extended conversation on any items on the agenda tonight. By the way, we're also going to have, with your approval and motions, a brief executive session tonight as well. I'd like to begin with the executive session. The executive session will be in the matter of the City of Plattsburgh Firefighters Arbitration Award. So moved by Councilor Ensel, second by Councilor Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. I guess we'll do that early on then. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Starting to add up money-wise.
We brushed your hair. Yeah. Yes. All of it. Next weekend, right? Iron
Coming close to fences and rocks.
Are you nervous?
Yeah.
Instead of run 26 miles, bike 1,000 miles.
Yes, let's take the worst for last.
And then swimming like 400 miles, basically. Yeah.
Now you need a driver for that. Back in the day.
Why are you wearing a orange you should just, if you know tomorrow's casual Friday, like every Friday you wear jeans and a t-shirt, or will jeans, like jeans, and like a casual shirt. I wear t-shirts, I wear pants, I wear t-shirts,
If we could resume, I'd like to resume. We had an executive session meeting to discuss aspects of the recent arbitration between the firefighters and the city of Plattsburgh. No decisions were made. We also answered questions regarding a suit by Renaissance Village versus City of Plattsburgh, an Article 7 tax assessment challenge, and again, no discussion or no decisions were made. So let's please resume. Any discussion of items that you'd like to further consider as part of the subsequent agenda? Councillor Kretzer.
I'd just like to offer an amendment to Resolution 7A. I provided a copy for all of you just to kind of read through. So I don't know if you want to take a moment to read through, and I guess I could read it aloud. In accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council authorizes the mayor to discuss and draft a joint service agreement with Clinton County for appraisal services, exemption services, and/or assessment services pursuant to RPTL 1537 and report back to the Common Council. The mayor's report should outline the basic tenets of an agreement and include discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of such an agreement, including cost implications and changes to service provided to city residents. If the Common Council determines such an agreement is in the best interest of the city, then it will consider authorizing moving forward. This resolution is subject to permissive referendum.
I would just like the mayor to comment on what he sees as a difference between what you penned and what Councilor Kretzer has amended or suggested.
Well, it's kind of difficult because we're just getting this now, but I thought our legal counsel had very carefully proposed a necessary resolution that would allow me to negotiate with the county. Ultimately, the decision will be left to you, but for legal reasons involving only the assessor's office and statewide administered municipal law, we require this 45-day window. But ultimately, in the final analysis, it's the council's decision. As you know, with the shared services, the whole point of the shared services regime that was started by the governor's office was that leaders of the various municipalities would negotiate and discuss these items with each other or with the county administrator. The county administrator helped minister all these various and facilitate all these various discussions. Once we believed we had a feasible and workable plan, then we take them all to our individual bodies for approval, but we had to be given some leeway to discuss and negotiate these before we brought them up for further discussion, because obviously, you know, there's many moving parts. These are difficult negotiations. In some cases, personnel are involved, and we certainly didn't want to ultimately propose things prematurely that simply couldn't work for logistical reasons. So that's I believe, why the governor proposed to do this in the first place. Very quickly, to try to understand this change in what our legal counsel recommends, it seems like it's trying to move that balance back towards the council again and interjecting them earlier and more thoroughly in the process than what was anticipated with bringing to you workable plans for your approval or not. So I guess I imagine it's a philosophical discussion of whether these discussions should be had at the council level or at the senior leadership of the municipality's level before it's brought to the council.
Just for point of clarification, with both resolutions, this body would still need to approve any agreement.
Yeah, yeah, the intent of either resolution is to authorize the mayor to start a conversation.
To start the conversation and then.
Right.
100% is the council's decision.
So in that sense,
The council
really,
and, excuse me, the council and the county too,
They'd have to approve as well.
so maybe the key word in the resolution A is negotiate, which really amounts to discuss and what was the other word?
Draft.
Draft.
Well, I think there's one other flaw in Mayor Pro Tem Kretzer's proposal is the requirement by state law to have this 45-day window. That's why this is being brought to you. You know that I've been recommending and I'm further exploring other consolidations as well. There's something unique about moving along with an assessor consolidation than the other four that I'm asking you to consider and research. It has to do with assessor's office's status in state law.
So, Dean, as long as we understand that though, then, or it could be, would you suggest that it be added to my amendment? Or as long as it's understood?
preference would be that we have that 45-day added to the amendment, but there was no template or magic language in the state statute. So you have to wait that 45-day period regardless if it's in the resolution or not.
That makes sense.
Is there a reason why you felt that you should omit that 45-day requirement in your proposed amendment?
No, it wasn't omitted intentionally. We could add it to the, in there at the end if you'd like.
Or keep the original well-crafted one produced by our professional legal counsel?
I still am going to offer the amendment, but I could offer it amended with that clause.
Any further discussion? Councilor Dowdle.
The municipal laws is at least 45 days. Is there a cap on that, or is that just an indefinite time period?
You have to wait after this, if this or a version of this resolution is passed, the mayor has to wait 45 days before he can negotiate with the county.
All right. But is there a limit as to how much time can be spent with the negotiation?
No, not in the statute. It's the minimum time period you have to wait.
There's a minimum, but not a maximum.
I would imagine if there was a new council, that would be off the table. I mean, sure, there's a reasonable limit, but
Okay.
No,
Well,
it's
we
not
would
that.
hope it wouldn't take 18 months. Okay, thank you.
Any
So, I
further
mean,
discussion?
this original resolution will, as a part of its process, include the mayor outlining all of the parts of the agreement, right?
course.
I mean, so that would not be procedurally omitted, right?
Correct.
That's part of the process that is even required by the shared services agreement process.
That's right.
I guess it's just, I wanted some kind of written proposal or draft for us to consider prior to having to make any type of decision.
Will that be the case? Was that intended to be the case?
From my point of
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was predetermined by the way the governor has framed these
Right.
discussions with the county. That's right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't know what we were agreeing to.
Right, right.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to avoid that.
Any further discussion?
Does this add anything to the timeline? Any extra time to the timeline? Can someone ascertain that?
What? The
The
amendment?
amendment.
resolution on the agenda doesn't include the formal mayor's reporting, so possibly if that, the council has to approve whatever agreements presented to them in any situation. The amended resolution seems to add another step where the mayor needs to make a physical report as opposed to however else it would come to them. Possibly it wouldn't come through a physical report in any event, but the amended resolution requires that, so.
I think the mayor has told us that he would present us with a report or physical outline of what the
Any further discussion?
agreement is.
Any further discussion of other items on the agenda? Would you like to use this opportunity to make any of your liaison reports or ask any other questions of the mayor?
I have one, and I'm glad that Paul D. Dominicus is here. Paul has asked in what fashion the council would like information concerning DRI updates as the process begins to uphold. He suggested that we could be informed in a number of ways, monthly reports, but the main thing is we want to develop some kind of system so that council is fully informed and in a position ultimately to make the best decisions possible concerning anything that we have to vote on regarding the DRI. So, you want to add anything to that, Paul?
No, I think that sums it up. Just
Right.
the best way that
Come to the microphone. We've been getting some concern from people in the audience at home that they're not able to
Yeah.
hear. Thank you.
just as the process gets rolling and in working with the mayor and Joel and other partners, that the council, when it's time for decisions to be made, you're aware of the process, what's been happening, and the best way to do that, whether that be, as Councilor Armstrong mentioned, a written report or some sort of presentation, whatever works for the council, so that you guys are aware of what's happening with the DRI as it's happening. That way we can make sure that both you're informed for decision making, and as residents ask you what's happening, the process
You'll
is
know.
transparent. Yeah.
And so I would be happy to, shoot ideas by you either in public session or in email, just to get the ball rolling about how you would like to be informed, and we can make a decision about that.
And for that matter, Paul, there for a second. I think that is really important because the public has an awful lot of curiosity over the progress of our DRI. You've now had more than a week to work with our new DRI implementation assistant. Maybe you can just outline to us very quickly how that dynamic's going. I know that you guys are, from what I see next to that office, there's an awful lot of activity, and I'm really impressed with the quality of the analysis that you're doing already.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at this point, we have met pretty consistently every day for at least a couple of hours. We are looking through and outlining some backup information for the projects that the city is going to be involved with that were outlined in the proposal to the state in preparation of the state's arrival. So that way we can, present what we have in place, the foundational documents that got us to where we are, and looking up some things to make sure that we're asking the right questions when the state arrives.
Hold up the mic. There you go.
Sorry. Is it on? I don't know.
Oh,
There's no application.
okay.
Okay.
Just to record.
So we've been meeting every morning for at least a couple hours, checking in, afternoons as things go on. We've got some meetings with some stakeholders as well next week to get the ball rolling on those things. And the state representatives are arriving next Friday to meet with the implementation team here and our partners for the projects that we have on schedule. So we should have more information at the end of next week.
And one of the biggest parts of the DRI project, representing about half of it, is the plans for Durkee Street, which obviously have strong implications on parking. Can you update the council on some really significant progress that you've made recently on the parking study?
Sure, as separately from the DRI, but in parallel to the work we're doing with the DRI, we received funding from Empire State Development to do a parking survey of downtown, but essentially the city, to take a look at what options we have as we're looking at Durkee Street development. Obviously, there are a lot of parking spaces there. People are concerned with parking, so before we do anything, we have a parking study that we are going to be working on through the grant funding from ESD. The RFP closed yesterday. We have not yet reviewed, but are getting ready to review the submissions. Myself, mayor, several other department heads, and some other stakeholders in the community to take a look at that, so we know. So we have an informed decision when it comes to development of Durkee Street and what parking looks like for the city.
Thank you, Paul.
Good, sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Any other discussion, reports?
So I'll just ask, does that provide an answer to how we want to hear this information come to us? Or?
Well, I need to hear from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Email is
okay.
fine.
Emails
All
are
right,
fine?
okay.
Okay.
All right.
And certainly as we continue with the DRI discussion, I'd like to continue to include councilors in that discussion on a regular basis. So let me know where your areas of interest are. We're going to probably break up the administration of this and the stakeholder involvement of this into 2 or 3 functional areas. But if you do have any particular interest, please let me know.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, reports? Seeing none, let's call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councilor Armstrong,
Here.
Councilor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Dowell,
Here.
Councilor Ensel,
Here.
Councilor Casper, Councilor Kretzer.
Here.
Just a few comments. First of all, I really appreciate the engagement and involvement of the councilors that come to see me each week, especially during the open house hours on Thursday afternoons. There's some huge issues that the city's dealing with, especially with regard to the budget, as you know. We're getting an awful lot of very good discussion on this and more ideas. I'm very impressed also with the level of engagement of the public. They understand the seriousness of this. And at the same time, we sense opportunity and optimism about what we can do together with regard to the DRI. I think all of these discussions to me are ultimately optimistic, because only will we have an opportunity to rebuild our downtown, to start to attract more people to our city. The only way we have those opportunities is by very sober and serious discussion amongst the council and with the public on some of the dilemmas facing us. We're all very good at putting politics completely aside and focusing solely on what's best for the city, and I certainly appreciate all your help in doing that. You're going to hear an awful lot more very quickly, I'm confident, with regard to the DRI. As Department Head Dominicus had mentioned, the panel from Albany are going to be up next week to really kick all of this off. We've assembled a great team, and we are confident we can begin to make headway and show some fruits very quickly. Last week, you actually passed a resolution to begin a sculpture art walk within the city, and we've been out scouting out spaces or places for this art in the last week. This community group is very excited and active in this. You see the highway oil building. We have to stop calling it the highway oil building at some point. The former highway oil building is now down, and very soon the co-op will have a wonderful little bit of green space across from them with some picnic benches in. It's a little bit of a holding pattern until we decide what to do with that entire city block. But I think we're going to see very quick progress on that as well. A concerned citizen today sent me a picture of what other communities do with regard to murals that have been completely transformational. And as you know, we have some very exciting mural projects going up in the city in the next year or two as well to augment what the 3 or 4 murals that already exist. So there's some really incredible things happening because of the hard work and the sense of positiveness and cooperation from both the council and our residents. So I thank you all for that, and I certainly thank you for all the comments and help you are also offering in this very difficult time with regard to the budget. So please stay involved and stay engaged and keep watching. I think you're going to see some exciting things happen in the very near future. That's all for my report. You can continue with the minutes, please.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the common council held on July 6, 2017 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Kelly and second by Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending July 12, 2017 in the amount of $174,730.54 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are authorized and empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Dowdle and second by Councillor Ensel. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered received and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councillor Armstrong, second by Councillor Dowdle. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the bills audited by the common council for the week ending July 14, 2017 in the amount of $577,407.92 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councillor Kretzler and second by Councillor Ensel. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Our individual sitting in for Beth's been doing a great job reading this week. Appreciate it. This is the opportunity for anybody in the public that would like to speak to the council on an item relating to the agenda. Please come forward at this time. There will be another opportunity for public comment on any items of concern for the residents of Plattsburgh at the end of the meeting. So please come forward on any agenda items.
Just wanted to, when you get to 7A, could you clarify that again, because I didn't quite get what the advantage was to changing it. So maybe you could explain that again, and if it's gonna drag it out longer, make it take longer, and if the end result is the same, I don't understand why there would be a change. So if you could explain it again, please.
Thank you. Would you like to explain it now, or would you like to just wait till discussion of the item at the time? I imagine there's going to be an amended offer and discussion then.
Might as well.
Okay. Be dealing with that just momentarily then. Any other individuals like to come forward on agenda items only this time? Seeing none, let's continue, please.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the common council authorizes the mayor to negotiate a joint service agreement with Clinton County for appraisal services, exemption services, and/or assessment services pursuant to RPTL 1537. This resolution is subject to a permissive referendum after at least 45 days. In the event a framework for such a joint service agreement is negotiated with the county, and so long as the resolution is not defeated via permissive referendum, the common council will be presented with a proposed joint service agreement for their approval.
Moved by Councillor Armstrong, second by Councillor Dowdle. Discussion, please.
I'd like to introduce just an amendment that we spoke of earlier. The purpose of the amendment is just to ensure that the council has adequate time to take the information that is drawn by the county and the city officials to make sure that we have adequate time to be able to review and understand what's being proposed. There have been times in the past where we don't necessarily get the time that we need to really look at things. Sometimes we get them the day of a meeting where a vote is required. So I just wanted to be sure that we had adequate time to be able to review and understand in regards to our constituents and what they need and what they want so that we're able to make an informed decision. So at this time I'd like to introduce an amended resolution which you have a copy of, and I'll just read it again aloud. In accordance with the request, therefore, the Common Council authorized the mayor to discuss and draft a joint service agreement with Clinton County for appraisal services, exemption services, and assessment services pursuant to RPTL 1537 and report back to the Common Council. The mayor's report should outline the basic tenets of an agreement and include discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of such an agreement, including cost implementations and changes to service provided to city residents. If the Common Council determines such an agreement is in the best interest of the city, then it will consider authorized moving forward. After at least 45 days, in the event a framework for such a joint service agreement is negotiated with the county, and so long as the resolution is not defeated by permissive referendum, the council will be presented with the proposal of joint service agreement for approval. I'm just trying to get in that 45-day phrase, and that's it.
Is there a seconder? Seeing none, shall we revert back to discussion on the item at hand?
So this,
I guess,
go ahead. So any form of scrutiny when it comes time that it's present will give us an opportunity to discuss this.
Pardon me?
Once we'll have it for scrutiny purposes, we'll have an opportunity certainly to discuss this.
Certainly.
So would we be presented with a final?
At that point, both the county
Proposal?
legislature and the council would have to approve the final framework. That's right.
And would we, well, this is in the future, but have the county personnel available here for questioning as well?
I'm sure that could be arranged, yeah.
and I guess
Speak up, Dale.
to
Sorry.
address Councilor Kretzer's concern, this will be presented to the council with what we would deem to be adequate or sufficient enough time to...
Speak up, Counselor
I'm
Insel,
sorry,
please.
with adequate and sufficient enough time to review the...
Right. Well, it says
Agreement.
here, will be presented with the proposed joint service agreement for their approval.
Right, I understand that, but
So
I
we
think
will-
Councilor Kretzer's concern was that we wouldn't get it on a Thursday morning.
Oh,
and
I
be
see.
expected to vote on it at that
That's
evening's
exactly,
meeting.
exactly
Correct. As a matter of fact, given that 45-day window, I would imagine that those discussions will be wrapped up very, very quickly because the county or the individual municipal leaders have to have their proposals in place by the end of this month. So you should have it in final form much earlier than the end of that 45-day window for that matter. Councillor Kelly and then Councillor Armstrong.
There were two parts of Councilor Kretzer's proposal that I really liked, and one of them was that we will include discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of such an agreement, but we can't really do that until the agreement arrives. But I hope we will include that in our discussion when the agreement arrives, if the agreement arrives, I should say. And also the cost implications should be discussed thoroughly before we vote. So,
As well as the service. I would say as well
Impact on
as the impact and
service.
services.
yes.
Well, I mean, I would think that that would just be the responsible kind of discussion to have in order to evaluate whether that's going to be to our benefit, to engage in this shared service.
Correct. I agree.
We have to make, you know, I mean, we're not here to rubber stamp anything.
And I'm sure the county legislators will be asking those very same questions. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Counselor Cretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request therefore, the common council approves the police department employee to attend the DPA Commanders Academy in Quantico, Virginia, from August 14th through the 24th, 2017, at no cost to the city, as DEA will be funding all costs.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer, second by Councilor Ansel. Discussion?
I just ask, a department employee would mean what level within the, okay, all right. I got an idea what level we're talking about. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Counselor Cretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore, the common council approves a police department employee to attend the 2017 Impact Conference in Albany, New York, from September 12th through the 14th, 2017, and the total cost will not exceed $193 and will be expensed out of the asset forfeiture fund. This training is necessary as the current Impact software is at its end of life and will no longer be supported.
Moved by Councilor Ansel, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion, please. Seeing none, roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ansel?
Yes.
Counselor Cretzer?
Yes.
I believe there's no resolutions for initial consideration. So this is the opportunity for councilors to introduce any additional councilor reports. Please, Councilor Kelly.
Just like to remind the members of the Budget Committee, it's Peter, myself, and Becky, if you were here, that we do have a budget meeting scheduled with Chamberlain Marks next Monday at 5 o'clock, I believe. And also the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee is meeting on the 25th at 5:30. That's a Tuesday.
Could you tell us more about that? I don't know, maybe you have already, but,
Well, this is our second meeting,
okay.
and I sent out copies of the FRB's report to the members and asked them to read it and digest it.
Just for
Also-
the Public Financial Review Board.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, I'm glad you could remember that because I couldn't. So, that and also a new copy of the council's 5-year budget plan, which they will read and digest. And also a copy of recommendations for fund balance, which Mayor Reed provided to all of us. So those will be some of the things we discuss at the next meeting. I'm looking forward to it.
And thank you for bringing that up. As you know, I did send to you some documentation with regard to fund balance policies that I shall be proposing, and also a recent report from the Financial Resources Board, a government agency in Albany that assesses the health of municipalities and gives us advice on various strategies and, in this case, resources to various municipalities on how we may deal with some of our challenges. I think many of you have already read the report because some of you have already commented to me on it. It's very reassuring to see that in this report, this expert from Albany makes some of the same conclusions that we've been discussing at this table and some of the necessary consolidations, some of the fiscal challenges, but again, within the sense of optimism that if we work together diligently with solely the best interest of the city at heart, we can overcome some of these inevitable challenges. I do remind you in that packet that you did pass a resolution last year before my time on the council to maintain a fund balance between 5 and 10% of expenses. I also shared with you in the front of this package the recommendation from the entity most nationally recognized to administer municipal finances, the Government Finance Officers Association. Their most recent guidelines recommend a fund balance for the larger cities of in the order of 2 months' expenses, which works out to 17% of expenses. You may note that's quite a bit higher than your 5 to 10% guidelines. They also go on, and I've had this discussion with some of you individually who've shown an interest in this. They also go on to recommend various situations that would commend a higher level of fund balance than that, including a relatively small city. As you may remember from your stats class in high school or college, the law of small numbers tends to work against us a little bit, intending to create financial flows that are more volatile. And the second factor that troubles me is that we're self-funded in one of our largest fund categories, that of healthcare. So I actually believe that although this sounds like an alarmingly large number, the prudent number for a fund balance is almost exactly what the City Council had about half a dozen years ago, in the range of 25 to 30%. They also recommend that if you're out of this range, that you get back into the range within 1 to 3 years. Now I mention this because in some ways your previous policy differed. One is that it had a much lower interval for fund balances, a fund balance that the experts in this field would call dangerously low. So I'd like you to reconsider that, and I am willing to put together a resolution along those lines. And on the other hand, your past resolution offered you a little bit less flexibility in getting back into the range than I would suggest. If you read the resolution, I did copy it in this packet for you. It asks you to almost immediately come back into the range if you've ever been out of the range. And as you know, as members of the council, the long-standing members, Councilor Ensel and me accepted, you've been out of that range ever since, or even before you developed the policy. So I think I'm going to recommend we align that along the lines of recommendations by the experts. Fund balance policy higher than what we're currently in, but with a 1 to 3 year transition to get back into that recommended range. And I will be producing a budget that's going to be moving us in that proper direction. So please expect a resolution from you. As you know, I tend to leave the resolutions to the council itself to formulate, but in this case I think this is of such paramount importance that I'm going to offer a resolution for your consideration, perhaps as early as next meeting. I also give for you the entire copy of the financial restructuring board for your consideration.
It wasn't review, it was restructuring.
It was restructuring, pardon me, not review. And if you're ever interested, I'm sure the author of this report, Mr. Tim Ryan, would be happy to come and speak to the council at some point to discuss with us both his concerns, which I share for the city, but also his optimism. I mentioned that he's put more than $1 million of state resources into trying to allow us to do the consolidations I'm recommending, and he's recommending as well, quite independently, by the way, in our analyses. So he wouldn't be doing that if he wasn't equally optimistic that if we work very well together on focusing solely on moving the city forward, then we can do this together.
Can we
Councilor
make
Armstrong.
these documents available online to the public?
I can, and if there's anybody who'd like one, I've actually got a couple of extra copies as well. I know a couple of members of Councilor Kelly's Citizens Budget Committee are here tonight, and so I did make a couple of extra copies. That's an excellent idea, putting it online. And my theory is that more information is better than less, and more people that can see some of the challenges, but also at the same time some of the opportunities is very good for us all. So thank you, excellent suggestion. Councilor Kretzer.
Just looking at the comprehensive review report that you provided, it's wonderful to see that the state is recommending our continued expansion of our marina project with phases 2 and phases 3, and they see that as a great opportunity for not only income but also to better serve the citizens. So I'll be looking forward to kind of getting that back on track and getting the permitting needed so that we can continue with the expansion of the marina.
That's a good point. None of the marina expansion plans have been at all slowed down. We're continuing to do the various engineering and seeking of all the permits for phase 2 and phase 3 expansion. As you know, we're also navigating a lawsuit at the same time. But that hasn't slowed our planning down. I'm actually very optimistic that we're going to find a settlement with the individuals involved that will still allow us to do that planning. I caution you, and I refer back to your wording on your own resolution on the fund balance, that if revenue should come forward, especially in one-time basis, we use that not to expand spending, but instead to supplement the fund balance. I also would suggest that a good philosophy for any additional revenue we could glean from a marina project, which optimistically, for instance, right now might generate, say, $30,000 a year, to use those kinds of funds for the types of investments as we might imagine for additional marina projects, rather than just simply to augment our fund balance or to increase or decrease our requirements to right-size spending having to do with revenue. So I think that these investments are somewhat speculative. I'm not going to include those kinds of speculative investments in my budget, only for the reason that my budget is going to be designed to figure out how to claw our way out of this hole for 2017, 2018, and perhaps anticipation of 2019. And these more speculative ventures, although wonderful when they succeed, can't be the basis for overly rosy projections on revenues that we've all too often relied on in the city as a way to not have to do the really hard work of expense reduction and right sizing of government. So thank you for that comment. Councillor Kelly.
Something I've been thinking about the marina is that if I remember correctly, our net revenue last year was $9,000. And I think we spent about $900,000 on the marina, and at that rate of return, it occurred to me that it'll take about 100 years to get the public's money back, and I'm not so sure that's a great investment of public funds. And the second thing about it is that we don't have the cash to invest at this point, and until we build up that fund like you're talking about, it's really difficult to think about expansion of physical infrastructure.
I think your point is really well taken. That for a city that has extreme fund balance challenges, I think it'd be foolhardy for us to expect that revenue from a project like this will significantly improve that picture. It doesn't mean we shouldn't continue discussions. I would, as involved, insist on the very best business plan, most realistic business plan we can produce, with a very clear timeline for when we expect a project to go from the red into the black. But we certainly should be exploring all those, and Department Head Peters has been very willing to give us the types of frameworks to have those discussions. So I'm thankful for that, but I also recognize that it's not going to really solve our budget woes for 2017, 2018, and 2019 under almost any scenario. We've got just too many zeros involved for that to make a real difference.
And if you consider the fact that we had to amend our capital plan and forego the paving of scheduled streets, I mean, that's a pretty concrete, if you'll excuse the pun, example of the kind of priorities we need to look at.
Exactly.
It seems like the numbers that Councillor Kelly gave, I don't remember those as being the numbers that I heard when we were going through revenue. So maybe at some point, Recreation Supervisor Peters could enlighten us to make sure that those numbers are actually confirmed.
I believe $9,000 was the net.
What year are you referring to?
Last year.
If you give me a second, I can get that for you.
Could you come up to the microphone, please, Steve?
Might need just a minute to make sure I got it. 2015, our expenses for the setup and operations was $71,269. And our payroll, which included our events coordinator, was $41,800 for a total of $113,77. Our revenue that year was $122. That was for 2015. 2016, our revenue was $134,700, and our expenses were $27,316. That,
So that's a net of $110,000?
yes, though that does not include a bond. This was in ban,
Right.
and will be bonded for 2018. Richard and I have been working on that even today. So we were, I also have that.
Your expenses were what again for 2016?
2016,
27.3.
27.3.
Okay.
Do you know the net, Richard? Do you know the net for these years?
I don't believe I ever worked those out. I know it was discussed here, and there was additional costs that had to be considered for PCW payroll
Right.
for doing waterfront work, but I think we included a number there, and there was still a net surplus, even after considering the debt service on the project for 2016.
I think
It wasn't large. I thought it was in the 20,000 range.
I think I recall Mr. Brody saying that after all was said and done, it was about $9,000.
Well,
But if
That
it
was
was $20,000, then you're still talking about 50 years to repay the debt, so.
well,
or
let's just
to get
say,
your return on investment, so, you know, if you're doing this for other reasons, great, but if you're doing it for revenue, it really doesn't pay off. It'd be better off to put the public's money in the bank.
It's just interesting to see the projections of the potential that the state sees in the project.
Yep, I read
Yeah,
that too,
I
Josh.
read
It is
that.
optimistic.
This was always
Yeah.
designed as a multi-phase plan, where phase one was never designed to recover amounts that would make a difference to the council. It was always, from the very beginning, that three-phase plan. Our engineering plans show that, everything else shows that, so.
And if we had the
it's a-
cash for
it's-
phases 2 and 3, we could move
Yeah,
ahead,
so
but we
it's to be
don't.
completed in order to realize the types of revenue that we're looking for.
Someday
Thanks,
we
Steve.
may, but we don't now.
Thank you.
So I'll reaffirm that we are continuing with the design work and the discussions along these lines, and we'll obviously report out to you as necessary. At the same time, Department Head Peters is also continuing to do the design work for Wilcox Dock, and perhaps we can have an update on that shortly as well. I think they're just about ready to recommend their desired scenario on that too. Any other discussion items? Seeing none, this is the opportunity for the public to please come and address the council on any issue of our residents' concerns.
Lillian Cassidy, and I work with Animal Rescue and Welfare Services. And I'm here to give you basically a 6-month report on the $1,500 grant that you graciously gave us back in February. So far, we have trapped, neutered, and released 10 cats in the city. That would come up to $610 that was actually expended from that money. In addition to that, we felt a responsibility that we needed to put a healthy cat back on the street. And so ARWS took on the expense of testing them for feline leukemia and FIV, and they were all negative. The 4 places that I'm still working with at the present time have a mom and 6 kittens. I expect those 6 kittens would be able to be adopted out, but the mom is truly feral. We have another location with 4 adult cats, 2 of each, and 7 kittens. The kittens will all be adoptable, and that will all, of course, be on our expense. We've, of the 10, I would say that we have 8 that have come from one colony that we've really wiped out. We're down to 3 males that have to be done. And it's basically been done because we've had such wonderful cooperation from the person who's actually been feeding. So he's been willing to trap, he's been willing to transport the cats and get them back. So I also wanted to give you some figures, just so that you could see where the city might fall into range with the rest of the county. Since January 1st, and I recognize that that goes back a little bit further than the grant, but we have taken in 246 cats from just our county. And of that, we've already adopted out 144. We've released in total 45 cats, and that would be countywide. And they have all gone back into colonies where people were actually feeding them and caring for them. I'm pretty proud of that. I think those are pretty good statistics. Of that 246, I would say that a minimum of 50 came from the city. And that doesn't mean that it came from a colony. It means that it came from someone calling and saying, I can't afford to have my cat spayed, and she got pregnant, and I now have 6 kittens. And so that's another problem to eventually be addressed, but not necessarily by you. But anyway, those are...
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Of those, the cats that you've rescued and identified since January, would you be able to tell me specifically how many may have been in my ward, in the 4th ward? Because I do know that there are a couple of communities along Tom Miller on Meadowvale and down on Montcalm.
No one in your ward yet, but I'm working with someone who will become the next group that we start with on Lafayette Street, okay, which we all know is
problematic. Right. Also in Meadowvale, Tom Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Lot.
What we've been trying to do is actually work with people that have called. So the 4 colonies that I just told you about, we've been approached and someone has said, you know, this is the number of cats that we're dealing with here. We're willing to continue feeding them, but we just need help to stop the reproduction. And so that's how we've been stepping in and trying to do it. I would love to have a way of really identifying where all of them are, but it's pretty hard.
Because I do know that there's a new litter in that neighborhood.
In a new litter? Okay. If you want to send me the information, I can make contact. Kittens adopt out very quickly, and so that's a good thing. We have a pretty serious screening process because I believe that every cat deserves a home like mine. So we do really take it seriously, and it's not just to up the number. That's less important to me than it is that they're landing in a place that's a good quality home. I know that we're a comparatively new group, but since we started in October, these are pretty staggering figures. We've dealt with 385 cats. That's huge for just one small group, and we're totally volunteers. We have no place that we can actually put these cats. They're all in people's homes until they can filter through PetSmart. And we've adopted out 222. Just so you know that we're not just looking for funding from the city. We have applied for and received a $2,500 grant from PetSmart Charities. So we will also be using that to supplement not just the city, but the entire county. So.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your efforts.
Thank you.
And the other individuals?
Hi, my name is John Seaton. I live here in the city. And hello, friends and neighbors. Nice to see everyone. I saw in the paper, and I got here late, so I do apologize if some things were already discussed, but there were a couple of things I wanted to at least put on the table for your consideration and maybe some additional conversation. I saw that there were some either ongoing communications and talk about a shared service with the assessor's office here. And I think that that is a fabulous idea that should be explored to its fullest. And the reason that I say that is a fellow that's done a lot of development here in the city of Plattsburgh, mostly in the downtown, I had a situation that occurred this year where one of my properties, the assessed valuation proposed was to be raised by $1 million, which I'm sure anybody in this room and the home that you have would have been more than doubled your assessed valuation. In the competitive nature of the business that I'm in, renting office space, that immediately puts me at a major disadvantage in the competitive market, where now I have to pass that on. Additional $3 or $5 per square foot. So the question that I have, whether the city continues to do it or it's a shared thing, it would seem reasonable to me that in this dialogue, we all know that things get reassessed. In the past, the different administrations that I've worked with, we've worked, you know, the properties that I would redevelop were pretty much needed a bulldozer, and then I make them nice, and of course it raises the value, and I understand that. And I don't mind paying my fair share, but to be immediately being raised by $1 million is pure insanity. In the past, they would tier it over a 3 or 5 year period, which, you know, seems to be a more reasonable way to doing things. So I would ask you to look at that, to put some sort of a mechanism in if somebody's going to be redeveloping property, to do it in a tiered method. And I think you have to be sensitive enough that in a tight marketplace, there's competitors, and you want to make sure that you're not, in this case, I feel being put in a very unfair advantage where I have to compete. You're calling me for office space, and I have to be here, and they call that gentleman, and he's here because of the way the assessments are. I think when you're coming to do an assessment, and there's certainly people that have the education that can put forth a, I guess, a ratio or a mechanism so that if you're going to raise me, let's raise everybody so it's an equal playing field. So that would be something that I'd like you to strongly look at. The second part that I'd like to piggyback on the same conversation is the city has $10 million for redevelopment of downtown, and we're all excited about that. But the thing that I'm not excited about, and we've seen it happen time and time again, sweetheart deals and pilot programs, where these developers come in and promise you the moon, they come in and rape and pillage us, they take the cream off the top, and then we're standing in rubble, not having 2 nickels to rub together, having to raise assessments on guys like me that spent 30 years trying to make the city a better place. So I think you need to be highly vigilant for the taxpayers and the community here, that when fancy pants developer from elsewhere comes into this town promising you the moon, and you say, oh, how dreamy is that, and give away the farm, you're screwing everybody in this room, and you're screwing me. And I just got screwed, and I don't want to get screwed again. Development is done because of a need, and it has to stand on its own, not because a crybaby's not making his money and his return that he needs. Development's great, it'd be great to see something in the parking lot, but you build it because of a need, and not giving away what we truly need is income. Please don't give away the farm on a stupid ass pilot program. It has to stand on its merit. And we all want the best for this city, especially me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
You timed that just about perfectly, and you
Yeah,
spoke
no.
frankly as always, so thank you, Mr. Seaton. Any other individuals like to come forward?
Hello, my name's Terry Pizza. I'm a 26-year employee of the city. I'm captain of the City of Plattsburgh Fire Department, and I was tasked with coming to you guys, not as a confrontational, but more educational. We consistently hear certain things that we feel we're putting you in a bad spot, that there's not a lot of cooperation between the two sides. And that simply hasn't been the case. But to help you understand, I got to kind of start back a few years. We did not apply for binding arbitration the first time. The city did, not us. Went to PERB, PERB told them they didn't have the right to file for binding arbitration, only an employee did. But we said we'd really like a long-term solution, and we didn't think binding arbitration was the answer. So we continued on with negotiations, and we sat and we negotiated to May of 2011, at which time the city's attorney reached across the table. He shook our hand. He said, "You guys have been more than fair." Not our attorney, yours. You have got a lot of givebacks here. This is an excellent deal for the taxpayer, an excellent deal for the city, and I have no problems going to the mayor and advocating for him to move this deal to the council. And if I need to be, I'm going to take this deal and I'll advocate for it to the council. So we waited. A month went by, 2 months went by. That deal never went to the council. Mayor Kasperzak sat on it. A deal that his attorney said was financially in your best interest. So he came on the paper and he said if the city of Plattsburgh wants raises, wants a contract, they need to go to binding arbitration. We did not say that. We did not do that. You guys first applied for binding arbitration. Secondly, you came out in the paper and said, we want to go to binding arbitration. So we did. Our word came out. You guys were mad. He didn't like it. He threw a fit. So he simply said, go back to the Press Republican and Google the fact that you asked for binding arbitration and initially applied. He said, he kind of dropped it at that point because it was public information that he had applied, not us, initially. The second time we did. We met again with Brian Kramer. I was the lead negotiator at that time too, and I said, Brian, is there any avenue that you see that gets both sides together with this mayor and settles a contract? He said, no, I do not. We didn't negotiate anymore at that point. We had phone conversations because by the rules, we have to meet 3 times. We had 2 phone conversations that lasted less than a minute. Got into mediation. The mediator asked Brian, do you think you're hopelessly deadlocked? Yes, I do. Asked us, yes, we do. We went on to arbitration again. The third arbitration. A man named Kevin Flanagan, who was the director of PERB, came here, and he crafted a deal, a long-term solution. He brought it to Jim Kalman at the time. Jim said, I think it's a good idea. He came to our team. We said, I was on that team. We'll bring this back to the body. He never forwarded it to the council. He never forwarded it to us. It went nowhere. When the director of PERB left town, he sat on the deal. Not us. Not you personally, but he didn't forward what was recommended by the mediator. So I personally made a motion after months of waiting to go to binding arbitration. The next day, he calls our union president and says, I know Terry made a motion to go to binding arbitration at your meeting. He shouldn't have known that. That's an improper practice. He shouldn't know what's going on in our meetings. But he did. If he rescinds his motion to go to arbitration, I'm going to forward you the crafted negotiation settlement that was put together by both sides. We said, okay. And then we sat and waited again. He never forwarded it to the council. He never forwarded it to us. I again made a motion to go to binding arbitration. He then called myself, I was the vice president at this point, and the president down. He says, well, now that you guys have actually filed for binding arbitration, I guess I'm forced to talk to you again. He was never forwarding that deal to us. He was never moving ahead on the deals. And both times, your corporate counsel, negotiator, had recommended those settlements as in your best interest. Then, we started down to arbitration. Colin got into office. He wanted extra time. We postponed it. We moved it back several months to have a chance. It did break down when we were offered less than the other bargaining units received, when we were offering more givebacks, we felt. We were very close. But in the end, we didn't get there. I don't blame Colin. I don't blame anybody. He was trying to do what was in the best interest of the city. We were trying to be what we thought was fair. We offered for the average that every other union received. We took all the raises, right down the middle. This was the average. We'll ask you for no more than the average. We shook hands. We were very amicable, but we were 1/4% apart. We went on to arbitration again. If that arbitration had gone your way, and you'd gotten 2 zeros in a health insurance change, you wouldn't be complaining. It didn't go your way. I'm sorry you got nothing. But I honestly told you, Colin, you will get nothing, and the raise is going to be 2%. And you said, well, we have some demand, we'll see what happens. There were no other givebacks in the city, so the arbitrator wasn't going to have givebacks when no one else does. Okay, so wrapping it up, we didn't choose arbitration, we were forced into it again and again. And we don't want arbitration, we prefer a long-term settlement. Last thing I'll say is your representative put a package together with us in the panel. The panel unanimously brought that to you guys. Unanimously voted it down, but your legal counsel representing you advised you to take it. He concurred that that was a much better option for you than the 2-year mandated deals. We can't make you accept the long-term options, but on 3 different occasions, your corporate counsel, your lead negotiator, has recommended these settlements and you voted it down. That's not the firefighter's fault. If you don't accept the advice of your legal counsel and you vote the deals down when they're put in front of you, we have no other option but binding arbitration. So that's basically it. We feel like you forced us into it again and again, and every time we've ever went, we have put an offer on the table. There's never been a single time we went to arbitration that we didn't say, we will settle, and here's what we'll settle for. And I'll tell you this, each and every time, I'm done, you got a worse deal from the arbitrator. It's costing taxpayer money by not settling.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other individuals like to come and address the council, please? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. At this time then, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
With the Councillor Armstrong, second by Councillor Kretzer. Roll call.
Councilor Armstrong?
Yes.
Councilor Kelly?
Yes.
Councilor Dowdle?
Yes.
Councilor Enzo?
Yes.
Councilor Kretzer?
Yes.
Thank you all.
Yeah, I didn't notice there was one right to
None of these are me.
I was just passing them down. Hey, guys, you may have some in, Josh?
Josh.
You may have some in the stack that you have to sign.
Okay.